And now, here to discuss the Central and Eastern European perspective on the ongoing war in Ukraine and how diplomacy in the Czech Republic is being affected by changes in its government is Jan Lipavský, former Czech foreign minister. Minister, thank you so much for joining me on World News tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's start with the latest. We need to discuss what happened in Geneva. There is a quote from President Zelensky saying, "We can see that some groundwork has been laid, but positions remain different as the negotiations were difficult." He also added that the progress was made on the military track, but not political discussions because those were limited. As a former Czech chief of diplomacy, how do you read into the outcomes of yet another meeting over the past 2 days and the relatively vague statements that came after?
Honestly, we can follow almost for a year different kind of attempts to negotiate between Ukrainians, Americans and Russians some kind of peace settlement or at least a ceasefire settlement. And we are all the time hearing different kind of words, but the substance remained the same. Russia wants Ukraine capitulation. They want to grab land which Ukraine is able to defend very effectively, therefore no conclusion as such. But of course, we always welcome the result of those negotiations. So I think it's no surprise that any major achievement was not achieved.
From your perspective, because this was yet again a trilateral meeting, so we had the representatives and delegations from the US, from Ukraine and from Russia. Do you think that the US is actually putting enough pressure on Russia to make it really want to sit by that table and decide on a ceasefire?
Obviously not. US possess economical sanctions which could be applied in a much harsher way on Russia, even though we have witnesses to be applied some of those. But Americans are saying, look, we want to have a dialogue with Russia, so we should not apply them all at once. I don't see it as a strategy which would be leading to concession on the Russian side, which is something which we really need to Russia leave Ukraine and stop the war.
Let's talk the Czech Republic and the outlook on the ongoing war. A major point of discussion in recent weeks and months, but especially with the focus over the past few days, is Ukraine's accession to the EU, January 1st, 2027. Are you in favor of Ukraine's fast accession to the EU?
I think it's very important that Ukraine will keep a fast Ukraine approach towards the EU membership. And look, now we are in a phase when we have an association agreement between Ukraine and the EU. We can see a huge increase in terms of trading, for example, between Czechia and Ukraine, but I'm sure also with other countries like Poland. And this is also something which puts extraordinary pressure on Ukraine to change how the state operates, how the state works. For example, the existence of the institutions like NABU, the Special Procurator against Corruption, it's part of the EU negotiation. So it's changing Ukraine for better rule of law, and of course for better trade partner, but also it is something for what people of Ukraine are fighting for. They are fighting for not to become the part of the Russian world, but to be world of civilized Europe. So we should be able to work with Ukraine. There should be no shortcuts. Ukraine should fulfill all the necessary criteria, but I don't mind if that happens fast. Let's have them as a member, of course.
Mm-hmm. I would also like to touch upon Hungary, because the prospective Hungarian Prime Minister Peter Magyar and his Taoiseach that is leading in the polls ahead of the April parliamentary election said he was not in favor of fast accession of Ukraine to the European bloc. What do you think the motivations behind such stance could possibly be for people like Magyar?
So we can now observe a very intensive campaign in Hungary. Viktor Orbán is fighting for his political survival. He would like to repeat election success. Polls are saying that it is very unlikely, and basically Viktor Orbán has instrumentalized the Ukraine topic as one of the most important topics of the elections. So I don't mind even the conservative statements from Mr. Magyar. And again, I would like to say, Ukraine has to fulfill all the obligation. It has to settle all the issues which has, even, for example, with Ukraine, with Hungary. And this is also a very important message to countries like Moldova or the countries of Western Balkans, that there should be no shortcut. But if Ukraine is able to fulfill, and I observed in last years that the Ukrainians are really effectively trying to have all the legislation passed and the country change in a way that they can become a member of the EU. And this proposition should be on the table, because Ukrainians are fighting for that. Russians trying to destroy Ukraine because of that. They don't want to have a Ukraine member of NATO, but also they are not happy with the EU membership. Remember, Maidan started with EU association agreement between EU and Ukraine in 2014. So yes, we need to keep this proposition in place.
You are one of the proponents of the Czech-led ammunition initiative. This very initiative, according to the words by President Petr Pavel only but 2 days ago, has delivered approximately 4.4 million large-caliber artillery shells to Ukraine since its launch, which was last year during the Munich Security Conference, if I remember correctly. But there is a conflict between the government right now and between the president. How do you assess the extent of damage that Ukraine would have to suffer on the battlefield if Prime Minister Babiš was to succeed and actually change the very nature of that initiative?
So by the numbers, by the figures which are being provided by the Ukraine side, it's almost half all the ammunition, in some months even more than half of all the heavy ammunitions being delivered through the Czech Munition Initiative. And it is really a power of the Czech industry and our diplomacy and our companies able to procure this ammunition very often from the countries outside of the EU and then refurbish it and send towards Ukraine. So at this point, it seems that the government stopped its activities against the Czech Ammunition Initiative under the international pressure. They said, okay, we will keep it in place. But of course, what I criticize from the opposition is that they do not want to give any Czech national contribution, which I think is a set. So I hope that this process will keep in place, that the donors will continue to support Ukraine through this initiative.
And it seems to be the case, according to the latest polls in January, that 62% of people from the Czech Republic back the continuation of that very initiative, with 36% being against it. As I mentioned, Prime Minister Babiš, what is your opinion? Is the current Czech government a part of what was dubbed the awkward squad with Hungary and Slovakia now, or perhaps this is something else completely?
I would even say that it's reaching farther than just Slovakia and Hungary. Andrej Babiš is a member of Patriots for Europe, with some parties in like in Austria and France, which are not in power. Maybe not yet. So it's not only about Hungary and Slovakia. So I'm not happy for the position when Czechia is basically cutting all the help for Ukraine. It was our government. We tried to do and give as much as possible, but ultimately we have lost the elections. So the new government is limiting that. And yes, I'm afraid that if that continues, we might be perceived even like this.
Minister, thank you so much for joining me on the program. Jan Lipavský, former Czech foreign minister, was my guest.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
And so this would be all the latest news for now. Thank you for joining me. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska, and I hope to see you back here on TVP World for more news and features in just a moment. Good night.